All right, so we're doing another episode of the hall class, and quite literally I found Charlotte sitting not in the hall, but at the back of the gym, the beginning of Sacrament. That's another easy pickings place to find somebody for an interview. So I've got Charlotte Richardson with me here today. Charlotte, you want to say hi to everybody?
Hi, everybody. Happy Sunday.
Charlotte's a great woman who's been a longtime member of our ward and actually in the area. I think I've known Charlotte for probably 20 some odd years back in Carmel Valley area. Yeah. So I look forward to visiting with you today. So let's start. Tell us a little bit, Charlotte, about where you grew up, a little bit about your parents and where you were born and things like that.
Well, I was born in Virginia in a very rural county outside of Richmond. And we lived there until I was just I must have been 3 or 4. And my dad was a retired military officer. And we were brought to Texas for work. And we lived in Dallas for quite a while, not far from Love Field. And there was a wild polio virus there, and I managed to get that. And there was caution tape around our house for a while. And with my 3 other brothers and sisters, they were probably very upset about that. The quarantine was not a happy time. But fortunately, that was overcome. We had a great time there. There were a lot of old rodeo guys that hung out with my dad. And we got to go to the rodeos, and it was a different time in the 50s then. So there was a lot of outdoor play, very little television. I think there was one television on the block. And we just, had a great time, all in all. We were raised pretty much all as boys, so I didn't stand a chance. My father was a very big outdoorsman, as were his friends, so we were shooting by the time we were in middle school, but that was to come later when we moved to San Diego. We stopped in Albuquerque and Roswell for work for him, and then landed in La Jolla for some reason. And we lived right near Windansea Beach for a few years, and then a short stint in Claremont until Dad built a house over by the cross in La Jolla, and that was all horses and citrus in those days. And our street was a dirt road at the time. The mailman wouldn't even come to the house. So it took from 1948 to 1953 to get to that point. And there were 4 kids in my family. My oldest brother was 10 years older. The twins between us were 7 years older. And we all attended La Jolla High School and La Jolla schools, which were San Diego City schools at the time.
So you're the baby.
I am. My mother called me the post-war effort, very proudly. Yes.
I've got so many questions on what you just said, by the way, that little background. So I want to go back to polio. Like most of us don't even know what polio is.
That's the wonderful thing that they don't.
But you got polio.
I did. I couldn't walk. I was paralyzed in both my legs and my whole left side.
For how long?
Quite a while, and I had to relearn to walk. And fortunately, my determined and also outdoorsy mother put me into ballet class, and I had a very strict European ballet teacher that I attribute to my mother and her that I don't have one leg much shorter than the other, although one is.
Huh.
Well, you can't tell much.
So is that the only affliction that you still have? Is just a little bit shorter?
The virus never leaves your body. President Packer had it. His case of post-polio syndrome was far more severe than I can imagine. Right now, I feel like I've been blessed that for some reason the indicators are very, very low with me. Although I do have some. It's a nerve-ending thing. It's complicated, but it does affect speech and a number of other things. So there are a lot of people that live with it, but it's not the popular disease anymore. I mean, you know how it goes in medicine. There are some other diseases that they chase because they're more prevalent, and most people think it to have been eradicated, although it still does exist in the world, but not in the United States, because we had that wonderful Jonas Salk who, in all of his goodwill, gave the vaccine to us. It wasn't a
little different than Moderna and Pfizer.
It wasn't a for money thing. He couldn't imagine having to charge for it. I mean, that was the nobility of medicine to my mind. And his hard work paid off for people like me and others. So, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your parents. So you mentioned that your dad was retired military, but tell us a little bit about your mom and dad.
Well, my dad went to military schools in Virginia. He graduated from VMI with a degree in engineering. And
that's Virginia Military Institute, is that what it stands for?
Yeah, it's one of the old guard. And my mother went to William and Mary. She also, interestingly enough, attended a school called Southern Cemetery, which is now SVU in Buena Vista. And I have pictures of her having attended that liberal art college or preparatory school, I think that's what it was. And then she went on to William and Mary, and then they met at a dance, and that was it. So World War II ensued not long after they were married. My oldest brother had been born in the twins as well. And he was stationed in Passamaquoddy, Maine, which was a large port at the time for the Navy. And he was assigned a group which was kind of a paramilitary group due to his engineering background, and they were the equivalent of what is now called the Navy SEALs, although they were called Seabees, and he was in the 1st Construction Battalion because it had just been organized by the Pentagon for the purpose of the war at that time. So he was in the 1st cohort, and he was sent, they designed some platforms because they had to do all, he said they stuck a knife between his teeth and threw him in the water. And they were stationed in Adak, and they put in the airstrip right there in the Aleutian Islands to fight in the Japanese during World War II. Wow. And it's still there. And there are a lot of things he wouldn't talk about. My mom worked for the Red Cross during that time, and then of course he came home, and here I am after his return. And then of course we went to Texas after that because he had friends in the military that also were retired, and they went into business, and they pursued their friendships and their endeavors from there.
What did he do in business after the military?
He was very entrepreneurial. He not only worked for the government and did some consulting for them, he was a general contractor and a developer and a designer. And there are quite a few things that no longer exist here in San Diego that were beautiful designs, although a couple do still stand. One was a Horizon home in University City that was a lift slab construction, which he conceived. It was actually post-tension concrete, and he did it for Lafayette Hughes, who was I believe, a cousin of Howard Hughes. They all knew each other in those days. It was a much smaller world. And the construction had a void in the center. It was square, equal sides, and there were 4 posts that were erected in the center, and they poured a seal on top of the cured slab on the bottom and then jacked it up to be the roof, and all around it were windows, and there was an atrium in the center, and it won an award. It was very nice.
Wow.
And he and another architect designed the Circle Arts Theater, which is no longer there. It was the Albar Temple for a while out in Claremont. They found some cheap dirt to do it because it was a kind of an innovation design, and they didn't want to spend too much money. He excavated a perfect mound of dirt and compacted it, and they poured the shell over the dirt and then dug it back out, and it was a theater in the round with perfect acoustics in the center stage.
No way.
It was really pretty. I wish they had never torn it down, but they did. So he did a lot of innovative things, and he was friends with members of the church for years. I didn't find out until much later that there was a gentleman who was a member of the Del Mar Ward who was an old friend of his who was on the city council and a board of supervisors, and they helped build the first planned unit construction in Claremont, which is off Monongahela Avenue, over just, I guess, southeast of Costco on Moraga or Marina Boulevard, in that area in San Diego. And then he went on to develop a lot of things in Rancho Penasquitos and put in the water and infrastructure there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I grew up on construction sites. I didn't stand a chance.
All construction. Now, I can't let it escape. You mentioned you went through Roswell. Did you, were you old enough to remember living in Roswell?
Yes, I have photographs of me at Bottomless Lake State Park.
That was a state park, huh?
It was right close by to Roswell. We were there for a short time. And it was a scary time for my family. There was a big Union problem because they didn't like the fact that my father had brought in his teams to build some government buildings that he was commissioned to do, contracted. And they blew up my father's car in front of the house.
No way.
Yeah, my brother, although I know people would recoil in horror to hear this, but my 10-year-old brother slept with a shotgun in the bed just to make sure that nothing happened. You know, we didn't know he had it, but he did.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it was a pretty scary time, and so I was evacuated out with his superintendent and his wife out to a Wally Bomb Airstream out in Bottomless Lake State Park area for a while, just to make sure that peace was kept and everybody was safe, and that pretty much provoked our move out to San Diego. Yeah.
And then you basically saw La Jolla and Claremont just grow up in front of you, it sounds like.
Oh, there was a whole lot of nothing. My brothers used to shoot quail up there. There wasn't just scrub. There was nothing on Kearney Mesa, per se. And one two-lane, a lot of old San Diegans in our ward will remember the two-lane blacktop road that went straight out to El Cajon through Mission Valley, and it was all cow pasture out there. Hollandia Dairy and Golden Arrow Farms, they had all their cows out there. There was no Mission Valley or nothing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what were your school years like over in La Jolla and Claremont?
Well, I stayed in the La Jolla area because we had started there. My mother didn't want us to change schools as did the other kids. I went to La Jolla Elementary School, and then my mother wanted me to have more refinement because Dad had raised us all as boys, and she didn't like it. So I had to go to an all-girls school up in Pasadena. It was called Anokia. It was the old Lucky Baldwin estate. I don't know if it's still there. It's over on Foothill Boulevard. And there were quite a few. It was an all-girls, pretty much athletic school. There was some academics, but I learned to play tennis and a lot of badminton, and we had a strong science teacher there. It was fun. And I did a year there, and my mom came back. She had to go to Europe with my grandmother for a while. And when she came back, I went to Bishop's.
In La Jolla?
Yeah, I know that there are a couple of other alumni here too, but that was an easy one for me because I grew up Episcopalian, and my mother was the president of the Women of St. James by the Sea Episcopal Church just down the street, so she could keep an eye on me. So I spent a lot of time there working the white elephant sales and doing service work with her. She never stopped. She was very devoted to her faith. And Bishop's was also all girls at the time. So that was probably one of the most wonderful experiences educationally I've ever had. But I begged them to let me go to public school. I wanted to have that experience, and I graduated from La Jolla High in 1966.
What did you like to do in high school?
Oh, I did everything. Anything that was outdoors, that's where I wanted to be. Archery, hockey, flag football. We had a thing called the toilet bowl that was down in the lower fields where everybody could play. In those days, it wasn't as organized as it is now. We didn't have play dates in those days. Everybody just showed up. And we had a great community center. So I played there. We used the backboards for tennis if you didn't have a partner. And I spent a lot of time in the ocean, too. My brothers surfed, but boards were too heavy for me. I was too small. They didn't start making foam core boards until late in the 60s, early 70s, so I was out of luck. And I did a lot of body surfing, swam in the ocean. My sister was a strong ocean swimmer, and Dad used to take us on great fishing trips. He had a boat, and we'd go out to the islands and come back with bluefin and put it in the freezer, share it with the neighbors. Our neighbors would also dive and get halibut when you still could. And we'd throw traps for lobster off Point Loma. And the boys would dive off the boat and pull them out, and we'd boil them up in those big old creosote tin things on a hibachi at the end of the dock. You just threw a hose in the put it in the water and wait for it to boil, which took a while, but it was delicious. It was wonderful.
Mm.
Yeah.
Sounds idyllic. What did your family have any special traditions or patterns, things that you like to do together?
I think that we were outdoors together most of the time. My dad couldn't stand to be indoors either. My mom was a great outdoorsman. She used to go fishing with him a lot. She didn't watch him leave. You know, she was always there with him. And I think that, well, my brothers really took up a lot. My older brother was a big race car fanatic. And he started they used to allow slalom races for midget and small cars over in the Del Mar Fair parking lot. So we used to tape up his headlights, and he'd do rallies there. And to the day he died, he loved race cars. He started racing up at Willow Springs later on in life. My other brother loved chopped and channeled cars. He liked the lowrider cars. And my sister was a great athlete. Still would be if she didn't have, she's a little sick right now, so she can't do it. But she actually would swim the pier-to-pier from Manhattan to Hermosa almost every year.
Wow.
She's a strong, strong woman. Yeah. There are a lot of athletes in my family. I'm not one of them, but I enjoy sports, yeah. Mm. And our whole family did.
And then after high school, I don't know the course you've taken, but you've told me about like 10 different careers that you've had. So I'm curious to know after high school what you did next and how you moved through careers.
Well, I told my dad that I wanted to study art. And he, of course, that was underwater basket weaving to a man with, his scientific engineering background. He liked the idea of certainty. And in those days, women couldn't take auto shop in high school. I mean, things that interested me. I liked things mechanical. I liked areas that weren't open to us in those days. So I figured, okay, art, it has structure, and I like the structural elements of organization and of art and things like that. And commercial art seemed good for me because I wasn't really great academically. I'd like to be outdoors, and it was hard for me to sit still. So when I told him that, he didn't like it at all, even though I had a scholarship to California College of Arts and Crafts up in San Francisco or Oakland. So I went to a local community college for a while with a friend of mine who was going to become a teacher. And she was already on track. And then I finally decided I'm going up to LA and I'm going to have to work my way through college. At that point, my dad had a whole terrible downturn in finances, and it didn't look good. So I figured, okay, I'll try it. And I got a job up there, and I started to work and try to find my way through school. And I ended up working in animation. I worked in an animation studio I started out as a receptionist, and then my boss found out that I had talent or ability, and he got me a scholarship to Parsons Otis. So I worked there, and I ended up as an ink and painter and also as a researcher part-time, which was another strength I had. And it finally got to the point in the 70s financially for me where I had to make a choice. And so I chose work. And my goal was to become a director. And I did achieve that at one point. I was in animation for a long time. I worked on a lot of the Charlie Brown half hours. You see, I got my screen credits there. I showed my dad, and he goes, He did not want to be wrong ever, but I think he was proud of me, that I managed it. And I had a consistent history with them and a really good relationship with those people, which got me more work in Los Angeles and also in New York.
All right, so pause for just a second. You almost went right past that. You were an animator for the Peanuts cartoon show.
Yeah, and others. I worked for Jay Ward and a couple of others too, and Robert Blackman in New York, yeah.
So did you know, what was his name, Schwartz? What was the name of the guy that...
Yes, Charles Schultz, yes.
Charles Schultz, not Schwartz.
I met
Schultz.
him and Billie Jean King and all of his buddies. He was a wonderful man to us. He didn't come to the studio often because he lived up in Santa Rosa, and he was a bit of a recluse, but he was extremely kind. And Bill Melendez was my boss, and he was probably one of the best bosses anybody could ever have. He treated us like family, and he cultivated talent. And one of the animators there was actually one of the animation professors over at USC, Bernie Gruber. Mm-hmm. And Phil Roman, who was his sidekick, ended up being the director for all the Simpsons later on. There were a lot of people that came out of that studio. Those guys were all the grandchildren of the 9 old men out of Disney. So I got to back in those days, 2 of the Keystone Cops were still alive, and they used to come by. and a couple of wonderful, Grim Natwick, who was the inventor of Betty Boop, was still alive, and he used to come by. I mean, there were some really wonderful experiences and exposures that I got as a result of having that job. It was a total gift to me, and I'll always appreciate it. And we remained friends for years. When I was pregnant with Dan, Bill was the first one to give me a car seat, and up until the time he died a few years back. Yeah, he's gone.
So how long did you have that career, or did you do other things in Hollywood at the time?
I did other things on the side as well because I wanted to dabble in live action, and the only thing that was available to me in the live action area was either research or maybe be an editor if I could get in. There weren't a lot, but I wanted to direct. I don't know why. I think it comes from the fact that I used to row and I was in the coxswain seat. I was small and bossy, and it was just my nature. So I figured I have good organizational skills. I can make this happen. And I did. By the time I was 30, that was my goal. And when it happened, I broke down in tears. I went, this isn't happening. It wasn't that I was amazed by it. It was like, is that all there is? Which is a horrible thing. But it was my moment to realize that I had to depart from this at some point. So by the 1980s, I had wrapped it up, left New York, left LA, and come back here because my mom and dad were sick. And it was perfect timing because I knew I didn't want to stay. I didn't know why. I just knew this is it because I don't want to make the next evolution because I kind of saw what that looked like. And for me, no.
All right, but I'm super curious. What is it that you directed? Can I still find it on film somewhere?
Well, actually, commercial production direction doesn't have a whole lot of history attached to it. I got to work with the Maisel brothers a couple of times on a Hellmann's mayonnaise commercial. This is the kind of work I got. A couple of Nike commercials. I did, the one I really liked was with an old client of Bill's, my old boss's, for Creative Enterprise out of Osaka, for some, what do you call those, tough sheds?
Right.
Yes. But I've always thought it was a good story. When the product arrived, it had to be flown in, so we had to get a small place to shoot local to the airport. So we were down by LAX. So finally we get the stuff off the plane, and when it came, all the instructions to assemble it were in Japanese. So if it hadn't been for the gaffers and the lighting guy, we never would have had that thing in place. It lost us another hour or two on the budget, but we put it together and we made it. So that was for Japan only, and then we did an English version of that, and things of that nature. It was nothing grand, believe me. Nothing grand. But I feel like I accomplished my goal, and I was able to do okay, and I had the support. I think the strongest thing was being able to bring people together and believe in a project and be a team member was the biggest reward for me, and the opportunity to be able to do that stuff. So it was great.
Well, that's great. You're right, and learned a lot from those experiences. Well, then you come back down to San Diego. What'd you do down here in San Diego?
I started back at $5 an hour working for an environmental firm, drawing rocks for archaeologists because they didn't have computers to do the imaging anymore at that point. That was in the mid-'80s. They had the Oak computers, and some of that stuff was starting to come forward, but it was all layout and paste up. And so I was your girl. I could do the drafting because I had that background, and I could do the imagery for the archaeologists to do the environmental impact reports. And so we put that together. And interestingly enough, we did the EIR for this whole area.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. It was called High Valley Ranch, I think, at the first part, something like that. And then the Olivenhain area, where out by where you all live, we did the Mount Israel project, where all those homes are up there. That was hard. A lot of money went into concrete up there. And then the Mount Israel water project and a couple of other ones, too, down in Santee. Yeah, it was fun. I really enjoyed it. There were good people that were working on things in those days, and we did a lot of jurisdictional work as well.
Any other highlights from your career that you'd like to share?
I can't think of any right now, no.
Well, you worked at the port. You've worked at UCSD. Who else have you worked for in San Diego?
Well, I worked for UCSD for a short time and then again in retirement. But the best thing that happened to me was working for the port part-time because it led to my full-time job at the airport for almost 20 years. And I worked in the airport design and construction division under somebody that I had known from the beginning. He was the boss, so people came and go. We had a lot of consultants. And it was nice to be able to start at the beginning of the first Terminal 2. And then by the time I retired, it was just at the very end of the design and the contract part for Terminal 1. So I got to kind of wrap it up and leave on good terms. So it was
That's
nice.
Great.
Yeah, and to me it was, I think we all feel at some point, wherever we live, we're tied to the land and the community. And it was so nice to be part of a project that did serve the community. That I think that's what was missing and why I wanted to leave the other stuff. I think the other stuff was based in kind of defiance of my dad to prove that I had to be right. I was just as stubborn as he was, maybe. So.
Well, and also tell us about your own family. I know you have, I know your son. Why don't you tell us about your son and your daughter-in-law and your grandchildren?
Well, my son is a fifth-generation San Diegan, and he is a father of 3 now, and I'm so excited. The oldest one was the first one born in the covenant because my son and I were both baptized at the same time when he was 10 years old. So I would say that we had some rough spots, but he's a good man and a good dad. And he went through Earl Warren. He went to the Heights, attended 6th grade there, and then went to Earl Warren, then went to Torrey and graduated there in 2004. And then
Played football.
He did.
And acted, if I remember right.
He did, somewhat, and he wrote a lot. And I hope he returns to that. And he got the blue ribbon in woodworking at the fair. He did a lot of notable work, and he received his bachelor's degree from UCSD in 2010 in economics. And then after he married, he got a dual master's degree in business and IT management of some sort. There's a very exclusive term for it, and that escapes me right now, but I'm really proud of him.
So tell everybody all their names.
Caroline is my granddaughter, my eldest granddaughter. Juliet is her little sister, and Benny is the youngest. And my daughter-in-law's name is Melody, and my son's name is Dan Willits.
You got it, everybody there.
Yeah.
So tell everybody about how you and Dan came to join the church and your experience. Maybe it's even your conversion story, which I know took a few years.
It did take a few years, but my first exposure was a trip that I made to the Mormon Battalion. In those days, they had a screen with a slideshow. And a slide came up that was identical to a recurring dream that I had had throughout my life. And it was an identical image, and I burst into tears, and the lady that was with me looked at me kind of uncomfortably and said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I know that place." And the next thing you know, the missionaries were over at the house, and my son had had a lot of exposure to kids who were in LDS families at school. And we were baptized not long after that. And Dan has remained a stalwart. I struggled. I did. But he's remained a stalwart. And I think that it was the best thing that's ever happened. I guess as far as my testimony goes, the strongest reason for me at the time was that I couldn't imagine why God would ever stop speaking to his children. And I was raised in a faithful household, but it was a Protestant household, and I call myself a recovering Episcopalian, I guess. But I've had a lot of love out of this ward. I got loved back into the church. So it was very hard for me. I had a space of almost 2 years where I didn't know what I was doing. I was going through a difficult time in life. And I felt like just giving up. And I had a very good visiting teacher who just, it was almost like she stalked me. And I remember sitting with her one time when I finally went back to church with her one day. And we were sitting in the car talking. And I said, what's in your patriarchal blessing? And she said, bringing rebellious souls back to the church.
Who was this?
Nancy. Remember Nancy Peters?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. They live in Conifer now. I think they moved back to Colorado.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Wow.
Yeah, she was a very sweet woman, very strong. She was studying to get her degree at that time, too, I think. Yeah.
So what do you like to do on a daily, weekly basis now?
I love to walk. I love to go out and get ideas from nature. I love to talk to my friends. I recently took another part-time job, which I've done consistently since I retired, and I really need to do that. And I work at an elementary school, and it is so much fun. The kids are so great. And I get to participate in a reading program 2 days a week with them, and then assist in the classroom in first grade. And then I'm the evil lunch lady at lunchtime.
What does that mean?
That means it's called yard duty, I guess. So I'm out there and I have to wear a safety vest and tell them, if they have a broken tooth, they go to the nurse. If there's some kind of kerfuffle, I try to calm it down. So far, so good. So I can't complain. It's a lot of fun. They're just so entertaining. And it's amazing, all those little personalities. And I think about the spirit being there with them.
I remember Cassie telling me about that, and it made me think. I've known you long enough, I think, in life to know that there's been ups and downs, and it seems like every time you're in a situation where you feel, stuck, little miracles have happened.
They have.
What does that teach you in your life?
I wish I could find the words. I think that I have a consistent thread of gratitude. That's never left me. And I hang on to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Heavenly Father's never left you.
No. I do have a testimony of the pure love of Christ. I know that as a fact.
Who is he to you or in your life?
A presence that's unerring and true. I love that one saying in Joseph Smith, after he had spoken of his testimony of what had happened to him in Sacred Grove, that he knew it and he knew that God knew it.
That's how you feel?
Yeah.
That's sweet. Before I forget, I want to ask you some of your favorites, because you've been in San Diego for a long time. Do you have a favorite area of San Diego you like to be or visit?
Oh, all the time. They're the old time stuff.
Like what?
Well, every Christmas we'd go up at the crack of dawn to Julian Cafe when it was snowed and get some apple cider and some pie. That's one thing. Earlier on also, I don't know if anybody can do this anymore, we'd all get thrown in the back of a pickup truck with no safety gear.
Of course not.
On the way out to Banner Grade to the Banner Queen Ranch and top a Silvertip Pine for Christmas.
Where is that?
It's way out down the Banner Grade on the way down to Palm Springs.
Oh.
Way yonder. So, you can find it on a map. I don't even know if that ranch is still there. It'd be nice if it was, but the rancher used to let people come in there and pay for it. And you have to do the work, and that's it. I miss a lot of the freedom on the beach area and being able to fish and do the things that we used to do. We used to be able to pull abalones easily, and during ab season we can't do that. We can't do gopher halibut. A lot of things are fished out, so it's probably good.
Where's your favorite place to walk nowadays?
I don't like to walk on the beach as much as I used to because it's not as quiet anymore. So I like early morning. I'll go into small neighborhoods and things like that. And now since I'm elderly, I can go to the gym on the treadmill. It's so sad, but it's true. And it's nice to walk around the neighborhood from time to time. And I do like to find new places. That whole area out behind Gelson's isn't too bad.
That's true.
Nice.
Yeah, that little walking area.
Yeah.
That's great. You got a favorite food?
Oh, anything Mexican. Always.
Favorite Mexican place is where?
Home. I'm good at it.
Really? All right. So she just invited everybody in the ward to come over and get tacos. Is tacos your specialty, or what's your specialty?
I think that I can make a fairly decent chilaquiles and albóndigas with turkey. And my tacos are pretty darn good. Yeah, they are. I like them. I look forward to them when somebody else is making them. So, yeah.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Anything else you want the audience to know before we wrap up here, Charlotte?
Stay strong, everybody. You just don't know what's going to happen.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Like I said, I put you on the spot today, but I really like sitting and listening to you and hearing some stories, some things I hadn't even heard before, and I'm grateful to hear it and glad you're able to share it with everybody. So thank you very much.
Thanks for making it so easy.
All right.